Hey everybody, Chris Latimer, co-founder of Vectorize here. Today I'm going to show you how you can build an AI assistant in Slack that can answer questions using documents, web pages, and other content. We're going to build it with N8n and Vectorize, and you're going to be blown away by how easy it is to set up. But there are a couple places that trip people up, so I'm going to go step by step and show you exactly how to connect everything together so you aren't stuck troubleshooting for half a day like I was the first time I tried to get this all working. Now, there are three things that you're going to need if you want to follow along. First thing is you need to have administrator access to a Slack workspace. This could be your company's Slack, but you could also just create a free trial for today if you want to follow along and see how we build this out. The next thing is you're going to need a N8n account. So go to n8n.cloud, create a free account. No reason why you need to be on any of the paid plans for this. And likewise, go to platform.vectorize.io, create a Vectorize account there. Again, no reason why you can't do everything we're doing today on the free plan. So let's start with Slack. We can start anywhere, but let's start with Slack. And you're going to come here to api.slack.com. And then up here in the top right, you're going to see your apps. Click on that. Click on create a new app and start from scratch. Give it a name. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take Vectorize documentation. I'm going to ingest that into our vector database, and then our Slack bot is going to be able to answer questions about the product using lookups from there, and we'll orchestrate it all with N8n. So let's call this Docs bot, and I'm going to connect this to our Vectorize workspace. Once this is created, we'll get some basic credentials. First thing we need to set up are the OAuth scopes. So what is it we're going to allow this bot to do? For that, let's go over here. You'll see this OAuth and permissions. And down a little bit, about halfway, a little bit more on the page, you're going to see scopes. And the way that we decide what this bot's allowed to do is by configuring OAuth scopes. And so we need to set all of the scopes that the OAuth, that our Slack bot can do on our behalf. And rather than sort of do these one at a time and say them to you, or you have to pause the video and go back, here are all the actions, all the scopes that we're going to use. So if you're following along, pause the video, put all these in, and then come back, and I'll do the same. Okay, great. So now I've got all of our scopes set up here, and I need to install this by clicking on the install button. Again, this is where you're going to have to be an administrator to make this work. Click on allow. And once this is here, we're going to get this token right here. And by the time you watch this video, I'm going to have invalidated this token for any of you sneaky people out there that might think that they can grab my token and do something with it. That's going to be gone. So, okay, for right now, we are good inside of Slack. We've got this thing set up. Now, let's go, let's go over here into N8n first, and let's create a new workflow. All right, now in N8n, we need to start by configuring how we're going to trigger our workflow. To do that, click on this plus here in the middle, come over to on app event, look for Slack, and then say you want to trigger this on bot app mention. That's going to bring up this little configuration. If you haven't set up Slack before, this is going to be blank. Come here, say create new credential. Then you want to go back to your Slack application, get your OAuth token, just copy it right here, push this in. When you click save, it's going to automatically test the connection. You should see a message like this that says connection tested successfully. You can then close out of here. And this is where we have some decisions to make in terms of how we want our bot to behave. I'm just going to have this in a specific channel. I'm going to allow you to look for a bot mention in that channel. When the bot sees it, it's going to respond. Now, I've set up here a little test channel. So I've created a private channel called docs bot test. And then once you create that, just do at your bot name. And it's going to ask you if you want to invite your bot to the channel, invite the bot to the channel, and then you should see something that looks like this. Now, I said there were a few places where people get tripped up. So let's put our channel name in here. Okay. Now, the first thing that may trip you up is if you say test step. And you say, okay, great, I've got this set up. I've got my app. It's connected. It was successfully wired up. And you come in here and you say, DocSpot app, hello. And then you come back to N8n expecting that maybe it just takes a while. This is going to connect any time now. And the answer is no, it's not going to connect. And this is one of the places where it's kind of not obvious how all of this fits together. So let me show you exactly what you need to do. The first thing is you need to come here. There's a little hidden drop down of webhook URL. So you want to grab that first. So copy that to your clipboard. And then what you want to do is to come back to your bot configuration. You go down to event subscriptions, turn that on, paste your URL in, and then say, oh, it's going to verify it. No, it's not going to verify. Why is it not going to verify? Well, because not well documented at all. In order for that verification URL to work, you actually have to be testing the setup. And so click on that test setup button. You're going to get something that looks like this. Then go back here to Slack, put your URL in. Now it's going to verify for you. Now this is the event. So we're going to get these events they're going to publish. We want our bot to listen to events. But what events do we want it to listen to? Well, the first is we want it to listen for app mentions. And then we want to listen to, where is it at? I'm missing it. Channels. There we go. Message.channels. So because in our case, we're looking for that channel, we want the bot to listen to new messages on that channel. We should be able to save this. Success. Good. Now, if this thing is still in our listening mode, which it should be, we should be able to come back here to our private channel again, and let's do the same thing again. Hello, fingers crossed. There we go. We got our message coming through N8n. So this is the part where a lot of people get tripped up. Really a little tricky and not well documented, but if you follow these steps, you're going to be ahead of the game. You'll get this done much quicker. So now we have to decide what exactly do we want to do when our bot is triggered, right? Because right now, nothing. Right now, it's just, there we go, it got triggered. So the flow that we want to sort of go through here is we want to take that message that somebody's sending into our chatbot, and we don't just want to go right to OpenAI or right to Grok or Anthropic, whatever LLM you want to use. I'll use OpenAI here today. We need to find the relevant context. Like this bot doesn't know, OpenAI doesn't know how Vectorize works. It doesn't know like what a RAG pipeline is or, all the things that we can do inside of Vectorize. And so let's jump out of here for a second and let's go to Vectorize. And what I want to do is I want to say, I've got all this great information on docs.vectorize.io. And this tells me how everything in Vectorize works and what it does and what it doesn't do. And I'd like my bot to have access to that really quickly. And the way we do that is with a RAG pipeline. So if you come into Vectorize, you're going to see this new RAG pipeline. Click on that. Once you do, you're going to get presented with this pipeline editor. Let's give it a name. Let's call this N8n Docs Demo. And the first thing I need to do is to figure out where I want to ingest my documents from, my data from. Now, we're going to look today at the web crawler, but this same process could be used if you have files and you want to upload some files into Vectorize. You could do that. If you want to connect to an S3 bucket, or you want to connect to Google Cloud Storage or Dropbox, whatever the case may be, you can do all that here. I'm going to use the web crawler. For that, I'm going to say, let's call this Vectorize Docs. And then let's come over here. Let's grab our URL. Now, by default, this web crawler is only going to crawl things that it finds that start with this URL. It's not going to find a link to Wikipedia and then suddenly start crawling all of Wikipedia. So let's save this. Next thing we need to do is to figure out our extractor and our chunker. Just for simplicity, I would say use the defaults. Defaults are going to work just fine for most of the case. And you can use this built-in vector database here. By Vectorize, you don't have to go set up a separate Pinecone instance or get an OpenAI key or anything like that to build your embeddings. It's kind of all-inclusive, which is nice. Click on Save Pipeline, and that's going to deploy it for us. It's going to take maybe 10 to 15 seconds for your pipeline to deploy. You're going to go through these steps of creating the pipeline, saving everything off, and then going through the deployment, and then the backfilling will start here in just a few seconds. Once your pipeline is created, after just a couple seconds, you'll see that it's going to go out. The web crawler is going to do its thing. It's going to start crawling the website that you put in. It's going to start pulling back the pages it finds, running that through the process of extracting the content, chunking it up, building vectors, putting those vectors into the vector database. And in the meantime, if you want to just sort of see how this is working, you can come here to this RAG sandbox. And like I said, this is the Vectorize documentation. So you might say, maybe this is the first time you've heard of Vectorize, and you're like, well, what exactly is a RAG pipeline? It's a question a lot of people have. And this will help you answer that question, because it will go now find the most relevant parts of our documentation. It'll show you, how relevant the content was that it found, show you the exact chunks that came back from the LLM, and then it will come back here with an answer from, in this case, I'm using Grok, but if you prefer, you wanted to use instead, maybe you're going to use, one of the ChatGPT models from OpenAI, you can do that here as well, and you can see sort of how it's going to come back. Very easy. And then after a few moments, you'll see that your vector indexes and your RAG pipeline will continue to make progress. And one of the sort of just characteristics of a web crawler is it's non-deterministic. We don't know up front how many pages we're going to find. You put a maximum limit on the pages when you configure your pipeline, or there's a default one on there. We didn't actually configure it, but it's going to keep going until it finds everything it can find, or it hits the upper bound of the limit. And then as it does, it's going to populate this vector index here in the Vectorize database. So this is working, but we want to now fetch the data, right? So a user asks our bot, DocsBot, what is a RAG pipeline? Well, we need a way to get the bot the data it needs, and the way that we do that is here in this Connect tab. And so we'll need two things here. So the first thing is you're going to need this URL right here. So let's copy this to the clipboard. Let's go back to N8n for a second. We're going to click on this plus button, and then what we need to do, go under core, make an HTTP request. Okay, it's going to be a post request. You're going to post to that URL, and then back on Vectorize, you need a token. If you try to just call this, you don't have any security, and it's going to reject your request. So click on Manage Access Tokens. Click on New Access Token, and then I'm going to make a short-lived token. You can make a token. For your case, unless you need token rotation, just make one that never expires. But I'm going to show you my token here in plain text, like I showed the OAuth token on Slack. And so, like I said, I don't want any of you people that maybe are a little sneaky out there trying to get my my token from me. So let's come in here, let's send headers. Okay, let's just call this authorization, put in our token, and then back on Vectorize, you're going to see, let's go back to our pipeline for a second. Here in that same Connect tab we were just on, right down here in this curl, you can see the structure of the URL. And so we need to grab this little JSON body. There's -d and then a quote, and then a little snippet of JSON and then another quote. So grab that JSON, come in here. We're going to send the body, and let's do there we go, using JSON. Actually, before I do that, let me show you. No, actually, this will be okay. So our question, so this is the JSON that we're going to pass in. So it needs a question, num results, use 5 is fine, re-rank true, use re-rank true. And then right here, instead of that fixed question, what we want is we want an expression. And here on the expression, we can come over here to our Slack trigger. And if you look here at this text field, you can just drag that guy right here between the quotes. You'll have the JSON.text. And so this says, this is the message that we passed in. So this was our trigger. And I don't remember if I need a bear in front of that or not. I guess we're gonna find out here in just 1 second. Let's test the setup and see what happens. What do we get back from Vectorize? Okay, perfect. Okay, great. So it just says it's hello. So we don't really expect a whole lot of useful things. Let's ask maybe a little bit better question over here in Slack. Let's say at DocsBot, what is a RAG sandbox? Now if we come back here into this guy, oops, I forgot one step here. Let's do this again. So let's test our workflow. Okay, here we go. Let's ask this question. Ask it again. Come back over here. So we got this. Now our HTTP request that we got back this time. Okay, this is like much better. So we see the average relevancy is 96%, meaning we had a lot of good content to answer this question. And it got this from places like documentation that talks about the RAG sandbox, and which is the thing in Vectorize that we just saw, where we typed in the question and we saw the responses that came back and how it all went to the LLM and all that kind of good stuff. And we get all of this, context here. And now we have this context available to us. The next thing we'd like to do is we want to formulate this response. We want to formulate a response that uses this content and get that back to our user who asked a question. So in order to do that, we can come here and let's say action in an app. And I guess maybe I was in the wrong category, but it found it anyway. What we want to do is we want to come over here to message a model. Now, just like before, you're going to come in here, create a new credential. I guess I forgot this part at the beginning. So there's a fourth thing you need, which is an OpenAI API key. If you don't have that, just come over here to platform.openai.com. And once you're in here, you'll be able to sign in, get your API key, and you'll be good to go. Once you get that API key back here, you're going to paste that in to to your N8n window here. Save that. It's going to do the same thing. It's going to tell you it was successful or not. Now I've got mine already pre-configured, so I'm just going to use the one that I have already built in. And what we need to do is we need to figure out what model we want to use. Up to you, really, what you think is going to work best. I typically find like 4.0 and above, in my opinion, does a good job of handling the information, the context we provide it, and giving good answers. I find that like 3.5 turbo and 4 turbo and some of those earlier models, like some of the mini models even, don't always do a great job of getting the response correct. So let's put our text in here. This is what we're going to pass into the LLM. Let's give it some context. A user asked the following question to our DocsBot. Now we need to grab the question, and that question can be found here in our Slack trigger, which will be at the bottom. Just like before, let's drag our text over here, and so we'll pass the question in. And then let's tell the LLM what context it has to use. So we retrieved the following helpful content to answer this question. And I like to use this little XML trick just to make sure the LLM understands where the content starts and stops. One thing we'll need to do here, because this is essentially a JSON object that's coming back. And so if we grab the documents, so the documents are basically what we got back from our call from Vectorize. It's going to pass this in as JSON. We do need to come in here and say JSON.stringify. And so that's just a JSON method that's going to turn your JSON into a string. LLMs like strings. And let's say based on the provided content, please create a response to the user. This will be sent to them in Slack. Please format the message using Slack Markdown. And sometimes the LLM will do that, and sometimes the LLM will not do that. And if you have tips for how to get more consistent performance there, leave them in the comments. That would be something I think other people would find useful. So let's click Test Setup now. We're going to send all this into our model, to our GPT-4o, and if all goes according to plan, don't know why we're going so slow here today, OpenAI. Okay, what did OpenAI say? It said, hello, the RAG Sandbox is an interactive platform. That is exactly what it is. And it got that from the documentation. So reasonable results that came back. So I think we're on the right track here. And then there's just one thing we have to do now is we need to send this back. So let's go to Slack again. And what do we need to do this time? Well, we need to send a message. We need to send a message. So we'll send the message back to our user. And just like before, what we want to do here is we want to send it to a channel. Same channel we were in before. Docs. Spot test. And we can grab the message here, the content that came back from the LLM. That's what we want to send back to the user. But it would be nice to come over here in this options and say, I want to reply to that original message. So we don't keep our channel kind of like messy and we've got things that are floating around. So let's do that here by timestamp. So here in your Slack trigger, the very last thing down here is event_ts. Grab event_ts, put that in right here. And let's do test setup again. Node executed successfully, and that should mean we see a response here in our channel to our original message. And it is not super well formatted. There's some prompt engineering you can do here to get better results, to get your Slack messages to be formatted a little bit better. I'm going to leave that as an exercise to you to play around with your prompt. The way that you would do that is just to come right back into your OpenAI node, and where I said please use this in Slack Markdown, you could give it a few examples of what it should do. Here's how you make things look like code. Here's how you make things bold or italicized. And you'll get some. I'm not promising you're going to get perfect results there on the formatting, but what you will get is a nice, well-informed response now that's going to go back to your user. All right, so there's one more thing we need to cover before we call this a wrap, and that is back over here on N8n. In your Slack trigger, we saw how we configured this webhook URL back on Slack, and that's how Slack decided how it's going to send the events to your bot. Well, the bad news is this only works when you're in test. There's two URLs. There's a test and a prod. And so as soon as you deploy your workflow in N8n for real and you're out of test mode, these events are going to stop getting triggered. They're going to stop triggering your workflow. So you need to update your Slack application with the production URL once you're ready to go into prod. You can either just update that here, or if you want to have a little bit more flexibility, what you might want to do is to actually create a test version of your bot here first. Use that one in test, create a prod version of your bot for that you're going to use when you go into production, and then just have two. Have the test URL wired up to your test version, have the prod URL wired up to your prod version, and at that point, it gives you a little flexibility if you want to make changes to your test version of your bot in Slack and experiment with it as it evolves. That's going to be a nice approach, but you don't have to if you're just doing something simple. Just swap out the production URL once you go and deploy. Now back here on our canvas, we had this step where we needed retrieval. Retrieval is really going to be a common thing that you're going to run into if you're doing any sort of retrieval augmented generation, which is essentially what we just did here. you're going to run into questions like, how do I get my docs from different sources? What's the best way to chunk them up? What's the best embedding model? How do I build this out so I always know I'm going to get the most relevant results back? And so if that's you, if you're interested in that topic, I've got another video for you that's going to go much deeper. I'm going to leave that here in our end cap. And until next time, have a great day and happy building.